Well, welcome, fellow F3 packs and everyone else out there watching. I'm Duncan Micklem, and I'm joined from Durban, South Africa, by a great family friend of mine and my family, which is Dr. Murray Mackenzie, who's very kindly agreed to speak to us about getting nutrition right, or simply what we put into our bodies daily. Murray, thanks so much for coming on to talk to us about this topic. So many of us just muddle through life, putting all sorts into our bodies, not really knowing what we're doing. And for many of us, the only rules of thumb are eat a balanced diet or always get your 5 a day with very little else. In the grocery store or the supermarket, a lot of us just have a quick glance at the price and some calorie stats on the back of a packet of whatever, and into the basket it goes with not much additional thought. So I'm very grateful that you're here talking to us and can enlighten us a little bit. But before we go on, Murray, would you mind just giving us a little bit of an introduction to yourself? Maybe just who you are personally and professionally, what makes you tick, and what drew you into the field of nutrition?
Yeah, thanks, Duncan. What got me going on the nutrition is I've been doing urology now for 35 years plus, and I obviously see a lot of aging men. And it makes me so sad when they waddle into the office terrified about prostate cancer or kidney cancer or various ailments. They come for checkups, and they're taking 5 or 6 or 7 different medicines: blood pressure, diabetes, depression, tablets to sleep. And it's all just so preventable. And it's not their fault, it's a problem of education. So, I've just become almost evangelical about it now, nutrition, because there's so much upside if you just understand, what we put in our mouths. And the big thing is that the food industry is not there, for your health. They're there for their profits. So you have to skirt your way around it. It's a bit of a cynical view, but you've just got to understand when you walk into a supermarket, what you're putting in the trolley. I think that's crucial. And your health starts in the supermarket, and it continues in the kitchen. So that's my big motivation. I'm 71 years of age and absolutely paranoid about a health span, not a lifespan necessarily, but while you are around, that you're functional. You can do your canoeing, you can do your Pilates, you can do your gym, you can do your hikes, all that kind of thing. So that's just a little summary of where I'm coming from.
Nice, thanks. Well, I think that's a great analogy, that your health starts in the supermarket and ends in the kitchen. I know I'm not very good about making good choices in the supermarket. Um, so many of us make resolutions with ourselves, like, oh, I need to lose a few pounds, or I must get fitter. A lot of the guys who are on the call now, they do some fitness, or they've signed up to a gym. The gym gets used a few times, or it may be the purchase of a gym membership. It may be the purchase of a Peloton or a watt bike or a treadmill that goes at home, and it gets used somewhat, but the weight doesn't shift, or worse, we get heavier. And the reason simply being that we don't get fit through just exercise alone. It's what we eat as well, which is critical. But just kind of about you and your story, Murray. So outside of nutrition and urology, I see you're an avid marathoner and an endurance canoer, having completed 12 55-mile comrades ultramarathons and 15 doozies, which for those of you who aren't aware, each doozy is a 3-day 120-kilometer canoe marathon on the Msumduzi and Mgeni rivers between Pietermaritzburg and Durban. So you're 71. You've just completed your 5th South African canoeing marathon championship. What's your secret to keeping fit and healthy and avoiding your, I guess, the reality of your paranoia about not really the issue about a lifespan, but more the health span?
Yeah, the bottom line is, I'm going to do a little talk now, but you can't outrun a bad diet. You know, it's a myth. You really have to control what you're eating. If your exercise is in an attempt to lose weight, you've got to sort out the nutrition first, because basically exercise makes you hungry, and if you go back and eat the rubbish that you were eating, you're going to go absolutely stone nowhere. So you focus on the nutrition, get that right, and then get onto the exercise, and the weight just comes tumbling off. It's absolutely staggering, and it's very depressing not to understand that, and very encouraging to grasp that nettle and get on with it, and get that old 6-pack back that you used to have.
Yes, I'm not sure whether I even have one. But so it's amazing that you mentioned that. So in F3 we allude to you talked about outrunning a bad diet. So we allude to kings and queens, with our king being our physical fitness, and our queen is what we put into our bodies daily. And if you play chess, or if you look in history, kings and queens go hand in hand, and kings don't survive very long without their queen. And you simply, slightly paraphrasing your analogy, is you can't outgun your queen with your king, which, as you said, that's outrunning a bad diet. I've tried really hard the last 2 Christmases. Obviously, there's a lot of good food and drink on offer at Christmas. I've tried really hard to outgun my queen over Christmas and failed miserably both times. So, you mentioned that you have some slides that you wanted to talk us through. Do you want to put those up now?
Yeah, shall I just start with that?
Sure.
Can you hear me there, Duncan?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is go through these slides, and then we can maybe have some questions at the end. But something clearly has gone wrong. How did it happen, and how on earth are we going to fix it? So if you just look at some of these pictures, I think they're positively tragic, especially that little boy on the right, the bottom right, sitting in McDonald's. I mean, he's morbidly obese, and he's tucking into French fries, and he's got a Coca-Cola, supersized Coca-Cola. Now, he's not slothful
So
and gluttonous.
we don't see your slides yet, Murray.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait.
Just need to go share your screen.
There we go.
There we are.
Have you got it?
Yes, and then just maximize. Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, so there you've got it. That little guy on the bottom right. It's really is tragic. Got his French fries, his Coca-Cola, and he's not slothful and gluttonous. You know, he just doesn't understand. He's addicted to carbohydrates, which we'll go into in a minute. And the guy on the top right, I mean, that's just too awful to even contemplate. But these are the sort of patients that come and see me, for checkups. And, they're really, really far from a picture of health. So for millions of years, we've taken an evolutionary path to get to that guy on the right, that upright human. You can see his 6-pack. And then in the last 28 years, look what we've got to. Supersized Coca-Colas and a beer belly, and it's certainly not a picture of health. So this David on the left, he was eating real foods in his time. And look at the one on the right. These are the modern foods. And just look at these young varsity students, particularly the girls on the left, absolutely trim and shapely. And then look at this modern picture of girls on the beach. It's almost become the new norm, which is also very, very sad. And this is a beach scene from Durban here, Addington Beach in the mid-50s. And you won't see anyone who's overweight. Everyone looks pretty good. The girls in their bikinis. There's no processed foods. There's no McDonald's. And the problem basically started around about the 1980s. And you'll see I quote American stuff all along. And that's just because they quote the data. It doesn't mean it's different in the UK or South Africa. But around about 1980, the obesity epidemic started. So when it comes to human nutrition, what do you want? Do you want a fence or an ambulance? You're standing on top of a cliff. Do you want a fence to stop you falling over, or do you rather fall over and get the ambulance to take you in? So this is all about prevention in the first place. And quite clearly, we'd rather have the fence and prevent ill health through human nutrition. The health issues, I'm going to list a whole lot of things here, but they basically all one and part of the same thing, and it's an addiction to carbohydrates. So they're chronic diseases, blood pressure, gout, type 2 diabetes, which is essentially a disease you give yourself over 10 or 15 years. Your eyes pack up, you end up on dialysis, you end up with cirrhotic livers, you can have your leg amputated, you have coronary artery bypass grafts, and then worst of all is strokes due to vascular injury from the high carb diet that a lot of us indulge in. Then some autoimmune diseases. Then this one is gastroesophageal reflux disease. As you put on weight, you start with heartburn, keeps you awake at night. You get this incredible chest pain. You have to take your antacids, but that's also carbohydrate related. This one's particularly sad. These are young women who are infertile, so-called polycystic ovarian syndrome. They're all overweight. They're all addicted to carbohydrates, and they have trouble falling pregnant, which is very sad. So I've just started helping some of these young women get back onto the straight and narrow. And just recently, there's 8 cancers that have been documented which are associated with obesity and a high carb diet. In particular, breast cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer. And time again, you'll see someone coming in with a cancer in the bowel and their BMIs are 35, their body mass index. They quite clearly haven't been looking after themselves. Then this is one that frightens me a bit, being my age, is Alzheimer's, because that and other dementias is now called a type 3 diabetes, where you start losing your mind, your memory, your executive functions prematurely. And that's also related to nutrition. Depression, those young girls I showed you earlier on the beach, they can't feel good about themselves, and they all shoot off to the GP and taking antidepressants because they feel so awful. And then postmenopausal women, so many of them, overweight, and they're taking bisphosphonates and calcium and vitamin D and all sorts of things to strengthen up their bones, when at the end of the day, it's purely a nutritional defect that's got them into that pickle. So just quickly to go through macronutrients, we've got protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And protein in particular, there's very little to talk about, except that it forms about 1/5 of our diet. Normally, you can get it from animal or vegetable sources. And the important thing about protein, there are essential amino acids you have to put in your mouth. Your body doesn't manufacture them. So protein, whether it comes from animal or vegetable sources, is crucial. And then just to get this out of the way, I was talking to one of our neurologists today who's a vegan, and he was sitting eating his lentils, and he had kilograms of lentils in front of him that he was shoveling into his mouth at lunchtime. And I explained to him that he'd have to eat 1.2 kgs of lentils to get the same nutrient density as a 170-gram steak. So this is another concept in nutrition, is nutrition density. So those lentils that this guy was eating, they're not biologically available in the same way that animal protein is, but that each to his own. If you are vegetarian or vegan, you can survive quite well without animal protein, but nutrient density is a consideration. Getting onto the fats, when we were kids, we were told, saturated fats were bad. You mustn't have egg and bacon. You're going to have a heart attack. You mustn't have eggs. They're full of cholesterol. But that whole ship has turned around now, and saturated fats are absolute royal game now. They essential to any normal diet. Then the unsaturated fats, you've got the monounsaturated, which is olive oil. And then the villain of all villains is the polyunsaturated fats, margarine, canola, soybean oil, and cottonseed oil. And they've got different names, the polyunsaturated fatty acids, factory fats, seed oils, or vegetable oils. But the history of these oils is interesting. They were used decades ago to lubricate machinery. Prior to that, they were using whale oil, but they shot all the whales, so they started using the cottonseed oil. And then along came the petrochemical industry with proper oils. So in the southern US, the cottonseed producers thought, what the hell are we going to do with our cottonseed oil? So Procter & Gamble said, well, let's turn it into a food. And there's a factory on the right turning this stuff into our food. Now, from an evolutionary point of view, we're just not adapted to eat this stuff. And you'll see just now, it's wicked for our health. But in these factories, the cottonseed is deodorized, it's winterized, it's heated to 500 degrees C. Then they add hexanes, solvents, all sorts of synthetic micronutrients, and then they put it into our food. Along came margarine in 1958 because butter was, we were told butter was going to give us heart disease. And then worst of all, the American Heart Association endorsed cooking oils, these so-called seed oils, as heart healthy oils. And over the last 30 or 40 years, that couldn't have been further from the truth. The problem is that all these food makers, Procter & Gamble and others, they have to pay for the endorsement, the American Heart Association endorsement on their product. So the American Heart Association became incredibly flush in a short space of time. And basically these factory fats are the backbone of our food industry. Now, this guy on the left here, you might know is Eisenhower, and he had a heart attack. And the guy in the middle there, Ansel Keys, had a hypothesis. It was a pure thumbsuck. He said that Eisenhower had a heart attack because he was eating too much saturated fat, i.e. eggs and bacon and meat. And the fact that Eisenhower smoked 40 cigarettes a day was neither here nor there. But anyway, this diet heart hypothesis gained traction, and we were told we had to go for heart healthy fats, i.e. the polyunsaturated fats, which has been a disaster, absolute disaster. These are the vegetable oils. They sold all over the place. This picture I took in Tanzania when I went up Kilimanjaro. And it's particularly the poor people, they use this as cooking oil, and their weight just goes up and up and up and up. McDonald's used to use animal tallow, animal fats to do their chips, but they now use the vegetable oils. And those oils are heated every day and cooled overnight, heated every day and cooled overnight. And they're used time and time and time again, and they actually turn into carcinogens. So I've put a little thing here. if you can, I'm just going to try and move your picture there. Avoid the polyunsaturated fats. For salads, dressings, use olive oil, and for cooking, use animal fats like lard or tallow. And try and avoid fried food in restaurants because of that reheating of the vegetable oils. It really is, I'm being a bit dramatic, but it's quite lethal. So the other macronutrient now, the carbohydrates I've alluded to, you get 3 different kinds. Monosaccharides, those are just 1 6-carbon ring, glucose, fructose, and galactose. I put fructose in red there because it's also another evil thing that we put in our mouths. Now, I'll clear that up in a minute. Then you get disaccharides, sucrose, which is our table sugar, which is glucose and fructose stuck together, lactose from milk, and then the hidden sugars, the polysaccharides or starch. And the really important thing is that they have absolutely no essential nutritional value. If you didn't put 1 molecule of a carbohydrate in your mouth for the next 50 years, you'd survive absolutely fine. You have to put fat in your mouth, you have to put protein in your mouth. And the thing to understand is that our liver makes all the carbohydrates that we need for daily metabolism and health. And sugar is now the new tobacco. So tobacco is regulated by governments because we know the health hazards. Alcohol is regulated by governments because we know the health hazards. But sugar still has carte blanche. It creeps into absolutely everything. So here's some bread, rice, pasta, potato, starch molecules, and all they are glucose molecules holding hands. So that bread will go into your mouth. Those little 6-carbon rings will get cleaved and they'll end up as sugar molecules in your body, and that will get parked off as fat. I'll show you in a minute. So this is the cycle of events. You get glucose or starch or carbohydrate, you put it in your mouth, gets absorbed. Your blood glucose goes up, and what's absolutely essential to good health is a very fine, tight control of your blood glucose. So as your glucose spikes, your pancreas makes some insulin, releases it into the bloodstream, and that gets your blood glucose back to normal, which is essential. But how does it do that? The glucose that was floating around in your blood gets parked as fat. And if the system fails, you develop something called insulin resistance. And as your insulin creeps up, this insulin is basically a fat storage hormone. So any surplus carbohydrate in your body will get stored as fat, and it gets locked away by insulin and unable to be released. So if you ever want to get rid of your fat stores, you have to get your insulin back down to normal. There are a number of ways of doing this. The one is to get rid of carbohydrates in your diet. And the other thing that I do a lot of is intermittent fasting. So overnight, you're obviously not eating, your insulin drops, and your best chance of shedding fat, stored fat, is when your insulin is within the normal range. So your blood glucose comes back to normal, and that falling glucose, what does it do? It makes you hungry. So what do? You go and have a snack. And what happens? You're back into the same cycle, and you go round and round and round, storing your excess carbohydrate as fat. These are just a few infographics done by a GP in the UK, David Unwin, and there you can see the top column there, the basmati rice, 150 gram serving, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's equivalent of 10 spoons of sugar. So just that simple serving of basmati rice is going to be stored as fat once that is digested, and the starch molecules are cleaved into individual glucose molecules. You can go down the column on the left there, the potato, French fries, spaghetti, banana. Look at a banana, 6 spoons of sugar, 1 ripe banana. These are your breakfast cereals, absolute disaster from my point of view. Just sugar content, just oodles and oodles and oodles of sugar, going to make you hungry by mid-morning. You're going to have a muffin, you're going to have a scone, you're going to have something, and you're going to perpetuate this awful cycle of storing that excess sugar as fat. There's the bread, also starch. These are the two fruits that I try and avoid is grapes and bananas. The others seem to be okay, especially the berries. Now, this is a nice little one. I don't know if anyone wants to answer this question, but there's some apple juice, some all bran, and a slice of brown toast. Can somebody just hazard a guess as to how many equivalent spoons of sugar there are in front of you?
I'll wait and see if anyone else wants to have a go.
It's probably
24
20 spoons.
24 that's from Drifter.
Oh no, I said 30.
Okay.
I said 24. Bunker.
Yeah, 16 spoons of sugar, and that's purportedly a healthy breakfast. No sugar there, no jam, but you know, you have that for breakfast, and within 2 ticks mid-morning, you're going to be reaching for a granola bar or something.
That's a good guess,
Just
Doc.
yeah.
He guessed
There's
15.
There's the sugar equivalent of a serving of rice, 1 slice of white bread, that's 1 boiled potato, and there's some pasta in the top right-hand corner. So you're getting the concept of how much sugar is hidden away as polysaccharides in these carbohydrates. Then this is a very, very telling slide. Look at those 2 women. The one lady on the left is very slim and she's healthy, and the one on the right is fat and sick. And they basically both taking in 2,000 calories a day. The difference is the lady on the left is taking a low-carb diet, 186 carbs out of her 2,000, and the lady on the right has got 1,000 calories of carbohydrates, and she's round and not in good shape at all. And she's following the so-called NHS Eat Well plate, which is a disaster in itself. This is just to show you 1 Coca-Cola, a spike in your blood glucose, insulin's released, the glucose falls, and you get hungry. So what do? You have another Coca-Cola. Here's some fast food again from McDonald's, the chips, the Coca-Cola, the spike in glucose right up to 12. The normal should be about 4.5. And then this is a pan-fried wild salmon, peas, cabbage, and a cream sauce. And the blood sugar, the blood glucose doesn't budge. And after that meal, you can go for 8, 9, 10 hours before any hunger grabs you again. So there you feel satiated, satiety. You're feeling a fullness, and you're not reaching for the next granola bar. A few things on the processed foods. They all come out of factories where flavorants, colorants, enhancers, emulsifiers are all added to this food. And the food industry, their mission is to create a bliss point, which maximizes the allure of what we put in our mouths. And there on the right is all the lovely stuff: ice cream, energy drinks, low-fat yogurt, candy, fruit juice. I showed you the apple juice just now. Confectionery, buns, hot cross buns, biscuits, a disaster. So the food industry, apart from their bliss point, their mission is to create a mouth party. And the fat and salt combo is chips and fries and nachos. The fat and sugar is fudge, ice cream, cookies, chocolate. Think Ferrero Rochers there. Fat, salt, and sugar, chocolate brownies. And the hyper-palatable big 5, you know, if they put something on the market, think Ferrero Rocher, think Mars Bar. It's calorie dense, so huge calorie density, nutrient poor, intensely flavored. I mean, you roll your eyeballs with delight when you put a Ferrero Rocher in your mouth. It's immediately delicious, easy to eat, and it melts down on the tongue. So that's their target, the so-called big five of the food industry. And why do they do it? Palatable, profitable, and it's got a prolonged shelf life. The weapons of mass destruction, these two, the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi industry, they will tell you that if you are putting on weight, you are slothful, gluttonous, you've got no willpower, and put your head down and exercise more, which couldn't be further from the truth. I put fructose in red earlier on, and it basically gives table sugar the sweetness. It's in the fizzy drinks, your Gatorade, your Energade, your Powerades. It accelerates aging. That's been clearly demonstrated. It's hepatotoxic, which means it damages your liver and it causes cirrhosis. So that little boy I showed you right in the beginning, that tubby little fellow with his Coca-Cola, he almost certainly had a cirrhotic liver. And in California, one of the guys I follow, he's starting to document these young children having liver transplant purely from their fizzy drinks that they are taking in now with gay abandon.
Just one
This
moment there,
fructose
Mike.
causes...
But Bunker, did you have a question? Is your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick one while we're on fizzy drinks. I'd be interested to hear your take on sugar-free, or Coke Zero, for example. They're pushed quite a lot, but then I've heard things that they're not that good either, even though they don't contain the sugar.
Yeah, you see, I knew that question was going to come, and you know, friends of ours have sugar-free tonic and sugar-free Coca-Cola, etc. And I haven't come across anyone who's shed 20 pounds since they've gone on to these sugar-free drinks. The problem is the addiction. So you need the sweet taste, and you're going to fool yourself by taking sweeteners or the Coke Zero, whatever. But you certainly you're going to have slightly fewer calories, but you're certainly not going to drop weight. So for me, it's not addressing the problem, the addiction to carbohydrates, if that answers your question.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, it does. Thanks.
How do you fix this? And, you know, I showed you a picture of the David earlier, you know, eating real foods, you know, just this old fashioned cheese, milk, butter, nuts. And my rule also with my wife, and I think this is important, you know, if you're in a family, you've got to be on the same page. We try not to buy anything with a barcode and nothing with more than 5 ingredients, because that means it's just been put together in a factory, creating that so-called mouth party or the bliss point. And try not to have anything with sugar in the first 3 ingredients. So Duncan, that, you know, when you're in the supermarket, just have a look, you know, on the back. And the problem with the food industry, there's at my last count, 68 different names for sugar in processed food. So they do fool you. So you have to be on your toes, picking up added sugar when you're choosing stuff in the supermarket. So do you want the farm or do you want the factory? This is the farm. It's a little shop near us. This is where we buy all our stuff. And you can look very, very closely. I don't see any barcodes on those carrots or on the cabbages. And we all know exactly what's in there, the peppers, the onions. I mean, it's quite clear what we're putting in our mouths. No barcodes, no food labels. And there it is: fish, meat, cheese, asparagus, avo, broccoli, olives, olive oil. You don't need a PhD to work that one out. Then just something which is really interesting, it grabbed my attention. The Inuits, these are 2 indigenous populations, the Maasai in Tanzania. The Inuits, if you think about it, all they do is they eat seal meat, they eat oil, they eat fish, and they are an absolute picture of health. The Maasai, they wander around following the grazing with their animals, and post-mortems have been done in these two populations. No heart disease, no cancer, and beautiful teeth in all the children. So that's got to tell you something. And there are no McDonald's outlets, behind those Inuits or those Maasai warriors, although it is starting to change a bit in Tanzania. So these deprivation diets that we all try, we go to Weight Watchers. It's a wonderful business model because it doesn't work. And the reason they don't work is because you never get satiated. You never feel full. You'll lose a bit of weight to start with, but it's a lifestyle, and that weight will come tumbling back in 2 ticks unless you achieve satiety. And the only way you achieve satiety is cutting out carbohydrates or reducing carbohydrates and putting saturated fat in your mouth. And that's what I showed you, that pan-fried wild salmon and peas earlier. You feel satiated, and for hours and hours and hours afterwards, you don't have to eat. And that's when you will your weight will come tumbling off. These are 2 examples. They're not my patients, but I mean, it's absolutely staggering. This guy on the left, 163 kgs down to 78. And then that lady, 116 pounds down. And this is going keto, which is just a very, very low carbohydrate diet. And then Duncan asked me just to talk about counting calories. Now, that piece of fish at the top there is 300 calories, and that donut at the bottom is 300 calories. But I can tell you the donut is 300 calories of hunger. You can knock off that donut and another one in 5 minutes' time, and you're going to feel the pangs of hunger in no time at all. So calories do count, but to count them achieves absolutely nothing. I never, ever count any calories. I just make sure that I've got saturated fat and that I'm feeling satiated, and I can go for 16 or 18 hours without having anything at all apart from a cup of black tea. This is probably the most important slide of all, and you don't ever use a scale to assess your obesity, your body weight, whatever. Use a tape measure, and the target is your circumference at your waist must be less than half your height. And the reason we say that is because your visceral fat, your fat around your tummy, is the lethal fat. That's what creates the insulin resistance, and the insulin locks that fat into fat stores, and you never, ever, ever get rid of it unless you go low carb and the insulin levels drop and it releases the fat from the fat stores. So that's your target. Just remember that one. It's a goodie. These are all the processed foods. I mean, we've all seen this. This again in Tanzania at the foot of Kilimanjaro. And all these things are just vehicles to get sugar into your body. We talked a little bit earlier about exercise. You cannot outrun a bad diet. If you do exercise, you add muscle, obviously, and that's going to push your weight up. It's great for your health, your mood, your runner's high, your endorphins, whatever you want to talk about, but it's incredibly pure on its own for weight reduction. So this is the last one now. You really, really mustn't have any fear of saturated fat. You eat eggs, you eat bacon, you eat meat, nicely grass-fed meat, marbled meat. Beware of processed foods. They all come out of a factory, which is all in the interest of the food industry, not in your health concern. Beware of the refined carbohydrates. Focus on real food, and just beware of what you put in your mouth, and focus on satiety. As soon as you have a feeling of fullness, you're on a brilliant wicket. So don't try harder, just try differently. Go low carb and high fat and just see what it does for you. These are the names, and I can give them to Duncan, people that I follow. This guy, Jason Fung, is an expert on intermittent fasting and its justification. How he guides you. He does stuff on YouTube. He's a Canadian physician. Robert Lustig treats those obese little fizzy drink kids in California. He's a pediatric endocrinologist. David Unwin is a GP in the UK, and that's his wife. She's a psychologist, and she deals with the addiction of carbohydrate. They're a great team, the two of them. Zoe Harcum is a Cambridge graduate. She did human nutrition, a PhD. She's full of wonderful tips. This chap, Asim Malhotra, is a cardiologist in London, and he's big on low carb and protection, coronary artery protection, obviously being a cardiologist. This guy's a journalist, Gary Taubes, superb. He did physics and he's now a science journalist. And Nina Tachels, she wrote a book called, I forget the name now, but it's all about fats and the beauty of saturated fats. And then this is the most intriguing one, Georgia Eade. She's a Harvard-trained psychiatrist who's now treating bipolar disorders, depression, children on the spectrum with ketogenic diets, and she's getting quite a lot of success. She's also on YouTube. So if anyone wants to follow any of these folks, I can send them to Duncan. So that's it.
Yes, please, Murray. We'll open it up to the floor. Where's our first question coming from? I see quite a few guys.
Yes, please. This is Haxton. Are we putting hands up?
No, it's fine. We're not that big a group. Go for it, Haxton.
Hi. So I think, yeah, during my dieting, I went to a proper nutrition and she prescribed food exactly like you're saying, right? And I was eating this food, which was salmon and peas and tuna and salads and lots of green on your plate. And I was eating, I didn't know until about 3 weeks in, and I'd lost 4 kgs already. And I said to her, is this for, this is quite a lot to eat. And I'd still lost weight. And she says, oh, that's for 2 of you. You're supposed to feed your wife as well. So I was eating double and I was still losing weight. So I certainly do fine. So my one question that I have is, I love tea and coffee, and I love having them with, I put sweeteners in them sometimes, and I put milk, full fat milk. So what do I do here? And I also like fruit juices, like mango juice or guava juice. And I know from what you're saying that these things are, really bad. How bad are they? Are these things that we should avoid totally and drink water?
Yeah, the fruit juices are a disaster. If you had the whole mango instead of the mango juice, you'd be far better off. And the reason is the fiber. The fruit's got the fiber, and it delays the absorption. So when you take that mango in, it's got the same amount of fructose and sugar, the glucose, but it gets absorbed lower down, and it gets absorbed over a much longer period of time. So you don't have the same insulin spike and the fat storage scenario that I tried to describe. Far better off, if you could, eating the fruit. When it comes to the sugar and the tea and coffee, I must say I don't have a problem with that, because we talk about a thing called a glycemic load. So over 24 hours, how many grams of carbohydrate are you taking in? And the way you're talking about the fish, etc., you know, the sugar in the tea and the coffee is going to be a very, very small portion of a 24-hour intake.
Yeah, so there was some interference coming through there, Haxton. So you might need to just unmute yourself if you've got some further comments.
Yeah, sorry. So I have about 7 cups of tea a day. I don't know if that's too much, but I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I'd say that's too much. I'm very happy with black tea with a squeeze of lemon. And over the last 3 weeks, I've been weaning myself off sugar in coffee, and it's been an unbelievably difficult journey. And just in the last few days, I can actually enjoy a cup of coffee without sugar. But geez, I tell you, it was an uphill battle, but I was determined to do it.
Well done. I do have another question, but I'll let the others go first. Thanks.
I have a question for you, Murray. Basically, when we train, nutritionists will always say that you need an element of carbohydrate. I mean, I know we've been talking a lot about processed carbohydrates, but when we're talking about complex carbohydrates that come from natural sources such as potatoes or sweet potatoes, brown rice, etc., I'll speak in the royal we because I incorporate it into my diet purely based on the fact that I require the energy just before I train the next day, for an example. And then after I train, I reduce my complex carbohydrates and I eat a higher protein and a higher soft carbohydrate. Soft carbohydrate I classify as vegetables. I am a vegan, but I tend to see a decrease in energy if I don't graze throughout the day with the right things, but I don't eat processed carbohydrates. All my carbohydrates come from complex carbohydrates. So I didn't hear you mention anything about complex carbohydrates. So is that a good part to factor in your diet, or are you suggesting to cut it completely out of your diet?
Well, just getting back to the exercise, your body stores, as you sit there now, you've got about 4,000 calories of glycogen in your body. You've got about 40,000 of fat stores. So to load yourself up just before you train with carbohydrates, I'm not sure is necessary. You can train hard. That cycle that Duncan and the others did down to the south coast the other day, I'm almost certain they could have done it just drinking water. Those, how many hours was that, Duncan? 8 hours, 7 hours through the night?
About 8 hours.
Yeah, so you could have tapped in, if you were fat adapted, you could have tapped into your fat stores and done that entire cycle just with by drinking water. But you'd have to prepare for that.
Yeah, because I'm pretty lean already. I mean, I think my fat content at one point when I did train before, it was like under 10% body fat. But obviously now that I've got older, I would say it's hovering between anything under 15%.
Yeah, so you still have got thousands and thousands of energy stored up, even with that 15% body fat. So, you know, I'll do weights tomorrow morning. I'm certainly not going to go and load myself up with any carbohydrates before a 1 hour weight session, that's for sure. But if I was going to go and run a marathon, it'd be a totally different story. You know, I would carbo load beforehand. But just for a 1 hour training session, there's absolutely no need whatsoever.
Yeah, thank you.
So a question for you, Murray. I'm a GP myself, and this is absolutely excellent presentation. Completely agree with everything you say. But I'm struggling to get my colleagues on board. How do you see that we get the medical profession on board with this low carb, high fat diet?
Yeah, it's an uphill journey. The narrative is, you must have patients who type 2 diabetics that are on insulin, and they just put weight.
Yeah.
It's a fat storage
Absolutely.
hormone.
Yeah.
They get fatter and fatter and fatter and need more and more insulin. And it's tragic. And you try and talk to the patient, about going low carb, reducing their insulin requirements, and they go back to the GP, because I'm a urologist, and the GP poo-poos it, says it's dangerous. If you go low carb, you're gonna go hypo, which is absolutely nonsense.
Without reducing insulin first, isn't it? So,
yeah.
But
Look, I don't know how to answer that question, but it's going to change very, very slowly. But by doing what we're doing now, we'll make headway. That Dr. Unwin, David Unwin, I think he's going to be knighted in the UK for his efforts now reversing type 2 diabetes in the UK.
No, absolutely, it's amazing what he's done up in Southport. And I often direct. Because again, you look at resources on the British Heart Foundation, NHS, like you say, eating well. It's all nonsense. They'll carry on. Use oils, avoid butter, things like that. And I say no. You need to go and look at David Unwin's web pages. You need to eat butter. You need to drink full fat milk. I'd like ladies saying, can I not eat avocado anymore? And I'm like, no, I want you to eat avocado. It's probably one of the best foods you can eat.
Absolutely the best.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's just trying to, getting that narrative changed, and I think there's another good website called diabetes.co.uk. Again, that's low carb, high fat. Thousands of recipes on there. So I'd recommend anyone have a look at that web page as well. If they want some inspiration for meals that they can eat. Just one question aside. What's your take on like protein powder shakes? You say they're unnecessary if you get an adequate protein content from natural sources?
Those protein shakes, do they have they got sugars in them?
They usually got sweeteners rather than sugars, so you still get a sweet taste with it.
It's usually like stevia or
or sorbitol or something like that, or ingredients like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to do any harm. There's one thing I just did want to say. We do marathon canoeing, and we get out of the boat after training for an hour, doing intervals or pyramids or whatever. And some of the guys, go to the car and they take out a Gatorade or an Energade or a Powerade.
Yep.
And all that beauty of getting the insulin down with that heavy exercise, that high intensity training, as soon as you put that Gatorade in, the insulin spikes and it locks that fat up in the fat stores. So within minutes of doing a really good session, you can absolutely kill the benefits by taking a sugary drink, a fizzy drink.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But again, I think we've all been scammed by the Lucozade marketing businesses, haven't we? That it will enhance your performance. You need this to recover. You need this to hydrate. And again, the food industry's got a lot to answer for, isn't it? They're kind of the main culprit here, aren't they?
Their defense, they will say they're providing what the public demands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, I'll digress now. Let other people ask questions. Thanks a lot, though, Murray. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Doc. Homer, did you have a question?
Hi there. Yeah, I think I probably know the answer to this, but I would be very interested to hear your take. What advice would you give us as parents in helping our children make the right food choices? I mean, in a world of sort of high marketing and advertising, it's becoming a musical battle every day to get.
Yeah, that's a question I absolutely dreaded. You know, I'm obviously in my 70s now. I don't have kids running around, and I sort of anticipated Duncan asking that question, you know, with kids at home, because you can be as strict as you like with your kids, you know, keeping them the eggs and bacon and vegetables, etc., and keeping ice cream for special occasions, etc., etc. But the kids go down the road to a birthday party and the whole thing gets unzipped. So I think it's really, really, really difficult. And, you know, if you think of, you know, preschool, you know, kids have these birthday rings, you know, and the mum of the birthday kid will bring a cake. And, you know, there's 26 kids in the class, you know, that's pretty much every 2 weeks there's going to be a birthday ring with scones and cupcakes. And so I really don't know how to answer your question. I think it's impossible.
Yeah, I kind of expected you would say that. I mean, my take on it is, and my wife's very good at this, is, you know, preparing one sort of healthy, hearty, wholesome meal per day is a good start with, you know,
Yeah.
proper ingredients, and you would hope that that gives them a base to work from, whether that's breakfast or dinner. Beyond that, it's a real uphill battle for all of us, and I think it's a battle we're losing a lot of the time. And I just wonder, you know, how long it will take before, you know, governments come in and change things. I think that's the only answer to this problem.
Yeah, I think the governments and their dietary guidelines, they move at a glacial pace. You know, nothing's going to happen in a hurry.
Thank you.
Haxton, did you have another question?
So my question is this. So when I work out, I was working out every day. I had a lot of lactic acid. So I started taking some stuff called BCAAs, and it's quite a pure form. It's 411, and it really worked. These types of supplements that either for recovery, or there's some fat loss ones, and there's other ones. What's your take on that? Would you recommend them or not?
No, I don't. Those are the branch chain amino acids.
Yes, branch chain amino acids. That's it.
Yeah, so I have been reading some stuff about them. It's there are some toxic side effects, but I can't tell you off the top of my head. But one of our fellow paddlers uses them, and I'm going to see him on the weekend, and I'm going to I'm going to look it up and point out that there is a downside. So maybe just Google it yourself. If you eating real foods, those pictures we showed earlier, you know, from an evolutionary point of view, you know, we got you just absolutely fine without all these expensive supplements and micronutrients and things. So I'm not convinced they are of any magical advantage or benefit.
Yeah, I think what you say there is the crux of the matter, isn't it? If I was eating this wonderful diet that we should all be eating, then I wouldn't need any of these things. So I hear you there, definitely. Thank you. Great chat and great insight. Thank you.
Are there any more questions that anybody has?
I had one more if there's time.
Absolutely, go for it.
Hey, Dr. Murray. I'm 25. You know, I've lived away from home since I was about 18, and I'm not a millionaire yet, but obviously things are more and more expensive nowadays. How would you recommend, or what things would you recommend specifically that are, you know, up there on the value side? And, you know, because it's everyone's biggest excuse, isn't it, for not doing it?
Yeah, so it's a funny answer, but, you know, people always say to me, you know, that real food that you showed, you know, it is expensive. But then I think you factor in your ill health, you know, when you get to my age, or, you know, age 55, where you're now diabetic, or, you know, you're having some coronary artery stents put in, or a bypass graft, you know, that gets incredibly expensive, that side of life as well.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
all,
I guess you're right
Choose your
there. So
problem.
it's an
Choose your
investment, isn't it?
hard is the it seems like the answer.
Yeah, I guess it's like it is an investment in yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay. I see Samuel.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's a great presentation. I just wanted to ask about kind of cooking methods. So I'm sure, as most people got air fryers over Christmas and all the rest of it, is that the best way to cook? And if oil is okay to use, is there much difference between vegetable and rapeseed and sunflower in terms of what's best to use?
You must use animal, the lard or tallow, animal fats, to cook, not the vegetable oil, not the polyunsaturated seed oils.
Okay, thank you.
So Murray, so I mean, I've found it fascinating. So once folk have realized that they need to make changes, how would you recommend making those changes? You talk about, I don't know, Weight Watchers or whatever other diets where it needs to be a lifestyle change. It needs to be sustainable. So how would you, what steps would you take to kind of introduce change and sort of eradicate stuff you shouldn't be eating and introduce stuff you should be?
Yeah, I don't think you can go cold turkey, but little incremental steps. So when I started this journey a few years ago, the biggest problem for me was rusks, early morning coffee and rusks, because 1 rusk, 2 rusks, 3 rusks, and sugar in the coffee. And I just said to my wife, please don't ever buy rusks again. So we don't have rusks. So that was step number 1. Step number 2 was Simba chips. Please don't buy chips. Have you ever seen a half-eaten packet of chips? Never. They always
They
get
always
cleaned out.
disappear.
Yeah. But anyway, it's an incremental thing. Identify the things that we've been talking about. There's no chocolate in this house. There's no rusks. And, there's, the supper tonight was fillet and salads with a mushroom sauce and a glass of wine. So I don't know if I make myself clear, but I would just go, target little things incrementally, one by one by one, and just knock them off like the Skittles at the end of the runway.
Mm. And you mentioned before we went on live, you talked about I don't know, you talked about your daughter and her training. She's an ultra marathoner professional, and you talk about habits and consistency. So what would you aim for there?
It's very, very difficult. One of the hardest things, Duncan, is to go out for supper. You can be as consistent as you like at home. No rusks, no Simba chips, no chocolate, no Ferrero Rochers, no Mars bars. You can keep your pantry absolutely clean, and you go out for supper and you fall off the bloody wagon. And you talked about Christmas, the 2 Christmases. I had exactly the same thing. It took me about 5 weeks after Christmas to get back on the wagon. After all the meringues and apple strudels and Christmas cake, and oh my gosh, it's a very, very, very difficult thing. But you just got to keep at it. I quite clearly have an addiction problem, and that's how I manage it. Is trying to be as determined as I can and as consistent as I can. But boy, oh boy, there are times where you get challenged.
Yes, absolutely. I think everyone on the call will agree with that. We are running up against time, Murray and everyone else. So with that, I think we'll probably bring the interview to a close. But I just wanted to express real sincere thanks for coming and talking to us. I found it absolutely fascinating, and there's no excuse for any of us now other than our own willpower to kind of make it happen. So really, thank you very much, Murray, and I will follow up with you afterwards to get a copy of the slides, if that's okay.
100%.
Thanks
That's
so much.
Thank you very much, Murray.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Murray. Thank you,
Cheers.
everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you very much.
Keep
Bye.
Thanks,
well.
everyone.
Keep well.
Thank you, Safari, for
Bye-bye.
organising this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.